Welcome. This is Football Entangled. I am honored to be with Stephen Callis. He is Football Entangled UK, and he's been working in football, in the movement therapy, in all types of of. He's been working in all types of training protocols for the last 20 years, I think, give or take. But for anyone that doesn't know you, why don't Stephen you give them a bit of an intro to who you are?
Yeah, no. Lovely to be back. So I've been coaching for around 19. This will be my 20th year this year. There's a multitude of different streams of coaching I have to what I do. But ultimately, that's culminated now in the last 6, 7 years of being directed towards academy, towards professional football as well. And along that journey, I've, as a coach, definitely refined who I am, what I'm about, and probably come to more ultimate conclusions with respect to looking at the person in front of me rather than looking at the thing that I've learned. Um, when I look at it through the lens of professional football as well, especially, and we can get into more of a detailed look shortly, but just looking over those, as I say, last 6 years or so, um, there are definitely certain trends that have got us to this point, and what I've understood is that the simplicity reigns true amongst a broad spectrum of footballers. So doing the simple things, and we will touch upon them today, really has yielded some of the best results. And that's, detailed conversations I've had, whether it's with clubs, their S&C departments, with the players, with agents. Their language always goes towards really complex, innovative ideas and things that they're trialing. And actually, when you start breaking down some of the most simple concepts, things that the tribe preaches as a very ground level of things, sleep, walking, general movement, they have been some of the biggest victories still when looking at longevity of a player and their health and being able to have a level of movement about them that is a foundational template for them to go on. So as I say, it's been a great 19 years so far. The last 6, 7 years have been a little bit more refined in this particular area,
Mhm.
and it continues to reign true that really the simplicity is king within this.
That's right. So this episode, or this series of episodes with me and Stephen, at the moment we haven't chosen a name, but this is basically is the place for football performance. I think there's tons of podcasts across the world in different football industries that cover their own little areas, or just kind of our generalized podcasts where they interview washed up footballers, or or they have like anecdotes from their old days. But there's nothing, as myself as a player growing up, I never saw a single source of truth in regards to how can I become an elite footballer. So this series with myself and Steven, we're focusing on creating a weekly series where we're talking about different areas of football performance that helps amateur, academy, college, semi-pro footballers get closer to the pro level, and also for professional footballers, of which we both have many clients playing across the top 5 leagues in Europe. Help pro footballers actually have a source of advice that is unbiased and is simply going to give them the best tools to have elite longevity and performance and fix injury. Because I've seen so many clients, as I'm sure you have as well, Stephen, where they feel let down by the advice of their club doctor, of their club physio, and they're kind of going in circles looking for a solution, but they just don't know it's out there.
Yeah, and you're absolutely spot on. I mean, I will share in small part of a detail just to kind of further validate what you said. But I've had a number of players from top clubs, so you're talking Premier League as well, that have come to me. I've had to sign non-disclosures just because the club themselves don't want the player going outside of the club to actually seek information with their reoccurring injuries. And
Yeah.
the main thing about this is if the clubs themselves were fully facilitated to overcoming these issues, then that player wouldn't be seeking information elsewhere. So yes, it just really further validates that it's an interesting one to go through. But clubs are not always best equipped to deal with things. They're only going to look at it through their particular lens, which is absolutely fine as well. I think it has to be part of the conversation. Anything that I do my best to bring forth it is in a true holistic manner. So there are things that I believe to be true or valuable, but then there's also the entirety of the thing and what needs to happen for that player, that individual to move forward, which is inclusive of what a club is trying to do and achieve. I don't believe that clubs themselves are out there to sabotage their players. Their players are assets at the end of the day. It's just that we all get caught within our bubble of knowledge, within the thing that pays the bills as well. We all want to try and protect that. And then there is, playing the system, so to speak. And all I think I want to try and achieve with it is looking at the individual in front of me and what does movement truly mean for them? And how can movement help facilitate one of two things? The betterment of their moving so they can then apply that within the game of football and be able to excel. And then secondly, which is most people end up looking at it through the lens of injury, and their whole kind of injury process is either being injured, some type of therapy treatment, whether that's massage, that's going through doctors for surgery, etc., like that, or surgeons. And then what is the S&C side of that? And I still, once I speak to players and I start asking questions, is going, all right, has anyone understood like how your pelvis moves, or if they're looking at a relationship between rib cage, pelvis, and cranium, and looking at some expansion through the breath work. So, i.e., is your thorax always stuck in extension when running? Do you have any kind of posterior expansion? These questions, from what I've been told from players, have not been
Mhm.
asked of them, and therefore there is a fair and valid argument is how much movement is being used to better movement along their journey. And as I say, I've done that for over 5, 6 years now. I've refined this in the last couple of years where I feel super comfortable and confident in what I'm doing, in how I'm doing it. And the biggest trend that I see is that the clubs themselves have got this big missing piece. They sometimes try to fill it, so i.e., they will have Pilates instructors and stuff that come in, but again, most of them, not all of them, because there are people that think very similar to us, more broad spectrum in their understanding. But a lot of them think within the curriculum they've been taught, and they don't necessarily ask more questions in relation to the person that's in front of them. And in terms of anatomy and physiology, what else is going on here? How else can I add a layer of improvement or experience for this movement to take place? So, as much as it is deeply layered, at the same time, there's an opposing side to this where most of the players, if not all of them, miss out on simplicity. So these quick wins, these things that they can do consistently, low hanging fruit, minimal effective dose, not a lot of expenditure in terms of energy. They haven't fulfilled those things, and it's something that you've shared a really strong message about, is the fact that without this kind of foundation underneath them, the likelihood of falling into or stepping into injuries or inability to progress in a particular way will just keep coming up. It will just keep resurfacing, and they'll end up looking at the next procedure or the next thing without going, actually, what is my template as a human? What's my base level here? What am I trying to achieve? Oh, well, I want to be able to move well. What have I got to be able to do to move well? I have to have. And this is where it can get repetitive, and we will go into greater detail as these episodes go on, albeit nutrition, albeit sleep. And my number one with the players, and it's been my continual takeaway, is just their general movement outside of football. So that they're super keen to play the game. They're super keen to go to training, get everything that's required in, maybe do some extras, whether they're in the gym as part of their essence. They will do all of this stuff. But then when the question goes, generally, how active are you? They're in the car, they drive home, they're on their computer, or they're studying something, or they're reading something, but they don't move. Like, you've just had this whole day of quite stressful movement upon you, and you've not allowed yourself any opportunity to go into more of a parasympathetic, more of a down-regulated state of movement, and as a byproduct of that, let the nervous system shut down and chill off a bit. So if there is this general tightness, this general achiness, they'd much rather, oh, let me pay for the masseuse to come over and try and get rid of it, rather than just going on a lengthy walk. And as a byproduct of lengthy walk, I'll touch on a little bit more of the detail. Your eyes are looking more panoramic, which is parasympathetic. If the nervous system allows itself to go into a more of a parasympathetic state, excess tension starts to downregulate, or the hip doesn't move that well, or the hamstring's feeling like this, that will just slowly dissipate. Doesn't mean it's fully eradicated the feeling, it just means as a general overview, your movement has downregulated, and therefore, as you then go home, nutrition, sleep, etc., like that, your body's more inclined to repair itself in such a way that you can then kick on again tomorrow, rather than going, oh, actually, I feel a bit off. Maybe I shouldn't be on the pitch. Maybe I should be in there with the physio. So, yeah, I will kind of reiterate this throughout the podcast. But there are so many small wins that footballers may think that they're taking part in, and they're not when you break it down through conversation.
I would argue many of those things are actually harmful, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, you know what it is. It's I've learned to be extremely collaborative in my language because of the amount of S&C coaches I've spoke with and the amount of
Yeah.
clubs I've dealt with. It it's far more fruitful for a player's internal state, from my view, to have acceptance amongst all. So, i.e., me as a coach can accept these other parameters, and therefore, what is it that I need to spend time doing it? Whereas if there's this level of confusion or resistance, that's going to come up in the nervous system. And whether that is or isn't quantifiable, I understand that the language that surrounds it um, can be ambiguous in that sense. I still believe it's just more cohesive for the journey of that person. That kind of goes back to what I said at the beginning. Like, everything has been refined to the person in front of me. Whatever system I've gone and learned, whatever assessment I've understood, the assessment itself is something for me as a starting point. The assessment really doesn't indicate what's inherently right or wrong in you. It just needs to give me something that I feel comfortable to start with you, and then you will feel and see the changes in your body and go, oh, I can actually do that, or I feel like this for the first time. That's where all of this boils down to. The player in front of me is the most important piece of the puzzle. Spending time conversing, understanding, applying, and going through different areas of their life will then lead us into better positions. But it's really hard to sell that as a package. You know, it's only when players experience that they then go, oh, crikey, this person is actually here for me on every level. And the most common feedback I've had is, I'm more use than what their agent is. I speak more to my players than what their agent does. I care more about their different areas of their life than what the agent does. And that's just not a one time occurrence. That's multiple times, multiple conversations, multiple feedback I've now had, is I deliver more on that aspect, which is holistic in its true nature, compared to those people who are the ones responsible for their whole kind of financial engineering of the game. You know, if that player isn't being able to perform, that agency isn't going to get the move or isn't going to get the required contract, and financially they're kaput. So, like, my head goes bang when I hear this stuff, because it's like, if I was the agent, or if I was pairing up with an agent, I want to make sure that these communications are really good each week, you know, that they're really strong, that they're really building, especially for young, not even especially for young players. Young players, it's really pivotal, but also players that are well established as well, like they're more refined in themselves. But equally, they need just as many conversation touch points as anyone else. So I'd say, yeah, broad spectrum, it isn't a strong relationship that they have with agents at the moment.
Mhm. Yeah, that's one of the things I've seen as well. And I think it's even more influential at the younger age, you know, when let's say like a player is making big strides at the, you know, U14, U15, U16, U17 level, and some agents start looking at them, and the parents are trying to, okay, what should we do? And there's never like, I mean, and please tell me in also in your experience, I don't think there's one agent, or I have yet to meet any agent that has any idea how you develop talent in a holistic, long term manner.
Yeah,
And even as something as there's a great study looking at all the first round draft picks in the NBA, I believe back in 2014. And of all the first round draft picks, all the players that were multi-sport athletes in high school, they were the
Yeah.
guys with more points, more games played, more assists, no injuries, and then vice versa was also true. All the players that were single sport athletes in high school had less minutes, less points, and had more injuries. And I would be shocked if any agent in England is going to mention that to any of the parents they're talking to.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's not even when I speak with parents and their young player and they're going through things. It's not even something that they generally bring up. I mean, most of their awareness will now, especially since the lockdown times, most of their eyes have gone towards online, and whatever information is pushed to them the hardest is the information that they tend to believe. So therefore, they're then looking at for this, and when I'm saying this, I'm speaking about young boys, young girls playing the game. They're being pushed towards more of that gym mentality, more of that isolation in terms of what I need to do to be this person in terms of a professional footballer. And okay, some may find that a fruitful journey, but realistically, that the biggest thing that's going to get them there is their ability to play the game, to understand the game, putting themselves at different stress levels of the game. Not this kind of mindset that came from the back of watching great players like Marcus Rashford, etc., continually showing videos of them training one on one with their PT, and then there were these conversations afterwards that, oh, my child, should have a one to one personal trainer. I understand the argument and why people may value that, but at the root cause of it, you're taking out a development of team ethic, a young child growing into understanding what a team requires to put them in this individualistic mindset of going, I as the individual just need this person in front of me, and that's what's going to take me into a betterment of the game. It doesn't work like that. They need to be surrounded by movement, multiple movement, and movement where they're kind of unconscious of it. So, i.e., they're playing multiple sports or they're down regulating at the weekend by going swimming. Those things there at a youthful age are so much more valuable and beneficial compared to what's been seen in this kind of more isolated mindset for the young children. So, yeah, just to reroute it, like the agents from my conversation definitely haven't spoken upon those things to parents. And then that next layer is, unfortunately, the parents' only information, unless they're really keen, and there is an example I'll share in a minute actually of what I'd read recently, they will fall into the trap of seeing what is ever as the most popular or what is regurgitated, or even if there is a trusted footballing source, because they pushed something, they then feel that they trust it and they don't know how to question it yet. And that will be like one of our conversations will be on some of the principles. And I'll always share that the quality of his life is dictated by the quality of question asked. If you want better answers, ask better questions. You've just got to surround yourself with more information to try and understand what questions to ask. And I'm not sure the parents have been able to do that as of yet. But the Arsenal fullback, Miles Lewis Skelly, I was reading that it was his mum when he was at a more younger age. Arsenal had offered him, I think it was their scholarship contract 2 years early. And she had got him to reject it because if his talent is that good, it will be there in 2 years' time. And what this in part allowed her to do is actually go and study to become a football agent. So I think she went to university, got a degree, and then went on to become basically his agent. And then she's gone and set up, I don't know if it's a side business or a charitable business, but for young parents basically who are unaware of what these agents are trying to do with their children as they're speaking to him, offering all these kind of golden lights. She's now got this website in place or system in place that allows them to get the relative information to make better decisions for themselves. Because that's the other thing, is that these young people are obviously promised a lot, and quite often it under delivers, or that secondary piece of being able to translate this into other areas. If you're going into a pro academy and you are falling short, there is no kind of other steps there. And I've had a lot of those players come through my books in the last 6 years where they've missed out on this top prize. They've kind of got a little bit of an injury that's stopping them kicking on. But when I speak about them, their next steps, there isn't anything in place. And this is the real worry. So yeah, in part of doing this, I think like if there are parents that take on board and listen, the most important thing is to use us as a resource of asking questions, but of course, allow yourself, whatever step you take, to really ask questions. And Ask yourself positive questions. Ask yourself questions where you critique the thing. Allow yourself to kind of come to better conclusions with it all.
Yeah, I think that lines up with something that we've seen spike a lot in the Premier League this season is hamstring injuries. And of course, how do you fix the hamstring injury? And then of course, what advice or support is or are those players getting from their agents and the club and the physios? And I'm sure you've had similar stories, but myself, for example, I have multiple uh, professional players that are not clients, but they have my WhatsApp, and we've had meetings over the years, and they'll get an injury. They message me all in a panic, and then I tell them, okay, like let's get started. You got to fix a lot of things, mate, and then nothing, you know.
Yeah.
And they go in these cycles where they're getting. I mean, I assume they're being told one thing from every direction, agents in the clubs, physios, and other trainers of some sort. But the bottom line is, then they never really get out of that cycle. That I've seen at least.
No, I agree with you. And I got to the point, so early doors in my conversations, so like 5 6 years ago when I started getting more professional players at different levels, in the inbox and having conversations with them, I would do my utmost to share my point of view, what's going on from a movement perspective, and where that differs from what they're currently doing. I now kind of refined it to the point that if it enters that kind of conversation and it kind of feels like I'm having to try and sell what I'm trying to do here, I actually say to them, look, head away, do whatever it is you feel most comfortable. But if you don't get the answers you want, then come back to me. And I found that a little bit more fruitful with them being able to take the following steps with them. Because that beginning part, what can happen is I can be quite confident in what needs to be done from a movement point of view. But if that then causes a bit of friction with their social circles, their club, their agent, their next piece of advice, what they've seen on Instagram, um, they're less likely to want to move forward. Or if they did move forward, they're more likely to be a little bit resistant with what we're trying to do and achieve. So by just letting them go away, knowing 90% of the time that they're not necessarily going to get the advice that's allowing them to take them from A to B, because that would have worked the first time round and they've tried this multiple times, they'll then come back and be a little bit easier. But if there is that kind of friction conversation and you leave them, they will go around in this little cycle or circle the whole time, not being able to get their end results. And it's stuff that I've seen and it's stuff that I don't want to happen to players, but also at the same time, we all have an ego or a certain level of certainty within us that we believe we know what we need to do. That can ring true, but it also can be some of the most destructive things that we do for ourselves. We're not being able to unattach and take back and go, actually, what is a missing piece here? Okay, well, I've got my coach, I've got my S&C, I've got my physio, I've got my masseuse. What is really happening here? And as I say, my mindset goes towards the quality of movement and can things actually move? So obviously, at the beginning you mentioned a little bit about the hamstring. But if, for instance, the spine is always stuck in extension, so if you're thinking about like a proud round chest, always forward, and then we're kind of in this anterior tilt position, and that's how life is lived 365 days a year, then those hamstrings are pretty much guaranteed always going to be in a lengthened state, but feeling tight. And it's only potentially when you learn how to exhale, bring the front of the rib cage down, allow the pelvis to take a little bit of a posterior tilt, maybe inhale on through the nose, open up the back of the rib cage, that posterior side, that you start to feel a little bit less tension in the hamstrings because you've just improved this stack in terms of the cranium, the rib cage, and the pelvis. I don't know many people that have gone through that side of things, as simple as it is, just to experience a slightly different movement that is anatomically has relationships attached to it, to then allow your body or nervous system to feel in a different way about movement. And one thing I want to kind of make clear, because I've seen this with all the different systems, their whole point of view is to make sure that they structurally change you so you live in a different body. I've gone in the other direction where I think if we look at the sport specifically, which is what we're doing, and then generally apply good principles consistently, and you're in a good state, then your nervous system will configure things out for you. It's just that you're not experiencing these states from the offset to ever know what the next feeling can feel like for you to then go and play a game on top of it. So it is complex, but at the same time, it is super simple. Some of these things that are going to be the solutions, and it's this middle ground of what quality movement looks like. You obviously speak about restoring functionality of the foot, and lots of people don't really truly understand that there is a foot where we can look with specificity attached. Do I have the ability for my toes to be able to retract, that surface area or ball of the foot to be a little bit more prominent, and to create this uplift, this level of tension within the body? And what it ultimately does, as the foot hits the ground, I've got this great base of support to pivot from or to drive off from. That's what's primarily trying to be achieved within that. And then there's that second element of it. What does a healthy foot look like? Do I have the capacity of the ankle to pull the shin or that tibia forwards and backwards? Most people use their knee to facilitate that motion. The knee will come along for the ride of the journey, but the ankle and the hip can actually do so much more by way of capacity of that motion. That can you truly internally rotate? Can you truly shift your center of mass towards the inside of the foot to go from right to left? Most people haven't had those experiences. When they have those experiences, certain tissues start to be able to glide a little bit better. The movement itself doesn't feel as alien. The tension that they held is no longer being held. They're able to then move in a slightly different way. And as I say, as a result of that, they go, oh, I feel pretty good. All right, great, go play the sport. Go and excel in the sport. Feel good, get the motion there. And as I say, my mindset change originally, I was looking for the physiological change consistently. I just want to see if you can experience that change, experience it more often than not, as long as you're giving me feedback that indicates it's feeling good for you or you're getting result from it. And then maybe just maybe over a long period of time, you will start to fall into those patterns more frequently. But I don't want it to be this whole mindset where I must move like this, I must be in this body position, because that's just detrimental. Like
Yeah.
you as a player, me as a player, when I go and play, every position I take up on that pitch, every movement I do is spot on perfect. The main reason being is because I need to be wholeheartedly invested in what I'm doing, and I shouldn't give it a second thought to what my body is doing for me. If the other side of it, I choose to use it as feedback, as a diagnostic, as where I may want to spend some time in relation to conversation and verbal feedback, fantastic. That can help build a picture, or it can help build a route for a player, but it doesn't define them. And that has also been another one, this whole online world that doesn't choose to put football first as its motive, as its driver, creates a lot of psychological issues within young players. They feel very confused. I must be doing this. You must be the best player you possibly can. And how do you do that? You get on the ball more often. You put yourself under different stresses with that ball, playing against people of better levels than you, so you can then learn how to go to that capacity. Those are the key things. What we're doing is on two ends. One is supplementary. It can support and enhance what's trying to be achieved by learning in the game. Or two, from a movement perspective, taking players through rehabilitative processes, is then part of that journey in there. So yeah, it's been an interesting one, and that was just in short a little bit about the hamstring there and what I may do. Again, everything is relevant towards what the individual does in front of me and how they express. But some key questions I would ask is how does the pelvis move? Can the pelvis move in different directions, internally rotate, externally rotate? Can I get the front side to pick up as the back side opens out? If we don't have an awareness of these movements, then the likelihood of the surrounding attachments are still going to be irritating. And what will happen, and it can work sometimes, but it doesn't always with the quality of movement, is a number of coaches will just put load straight onto that, hoping that that movement will happen if they just get them into an anatomical position. I'm cut from a different cloth. I want them to connect a little bit more mind to body and allow them to try and get that actual motion, get that sensation. And as I say, once things can glide and feel it a bit more, I preferentially want them to go and load that through the game. They can go and make whatever choices they need to in tandem with their clubs, and I'll support that as best as I can, or offer alternatives if needs be. Um, but as I say, that little bit in between, I don't think many practitioners are taking care of that.
Well, I think ultimately they just weren't taught to think that way.
Yeah. And it goes back to what we said at the beginning. Like they're going to be protective towards their education. They're going to fall in line with what their payroll requires them to do.
Mhm.
And I have seen definitely in the last 6 months, like people that I find valuable as sources of information that I like to surround myself with to ensure that I'm either strengthening my knowledge or I'm getting something that contradicts it to try and reaffirm my belief or maybe go in a slightly different direction. The clubs have reached out to those people to then go in and teach these 1 or 2 day seminars. Um, so that's quite fruitful because at the end of the day, I think there will be so many players that do end up continuing to look elsewhere and find um, information that benefits them. They then choose to document this, and it becomes popularized because of the amount of followers that they have. That clubs will have to take note in one way, shape, or form, and they can either be ignorant or inclusive. But most modern practices will want to be inclusive at the end of it. So I think there is this greater opportunity for a shift in what we do as being more acceptable from the inside looking out, whereas at the moment we work a lot on the outside with the players. The biggest way we can help something is actually by being a big part of what actually happens day in, day out for every single player. So I am hopeful that that's where the transition and our conversations and that we continue to have and conversations with different people who are like-minded, I think they will all continue to support that idea that collaboration is really key here.
Spot on. My first question is: do you think there will ever be the willingness from Club SNC to change, to toss out their current framework and to adopt something different?
I think,
And
go on.
and there's multiple reasons, like I would argue why that should or maybe shouldn't happen, but but more importantly, just based on the fact alone of how many top players have injuries, that alone should spike or inspire conversation about change.
I, I think, right, so I've engaged in many conversations in the S&C world, and they're at argument with themselves, a lot of them. So this is something that I find comical in itself. One of them recently was telling me that feedback from a player by way of sensation isn't really validating. So what they're saying is if that person says, ow, this hurts, they will still go, no, my knowledge supersedes what you're feeling, crack on and do whatever X, Y, and Z movement. I personally think that's completely bonkers. And if anyone has a coach that is that well drilled in what they're trying to do, maybe ask some better questions or go and get like secondary advice because there's no way just from a general point of view that you should be going into this deep position where it continually hurts. Like your feedback, your sensation is part of who we are as human beings. We have these sensation receptors in the body, like it's part of your journey at the end of the day. So that has to be taken into consideration. But the second piece within that is like, I think the shift will come when they start to accept that or bring to life the information as their own. So they, within whatever they're doing, they will then try and add these smaller little pieces that we will speak about, and then all of a sudden it will be like, actually, this is what S&C is still about. That's where I believe it will continue because that's what I said. The people that I spend time studying and learning from have gone in and done these workshops and upskilled them in certain ways, which is more relative towards breathing and opening up the thorax and stuff like that, and the position of the rib cage, the pelvis, and the cranium. That club will then start to adopt that as their practice and it will become as part of their S&C world. So that's what I believe will happen is that they will adopt the information and still look to push out those that are, where we are and others are that are trying to help the players, but not necessarily from the inside out perspective. I still think they will try and hold um, their ground within what they're trying to achieve. It will just become more explorative. So not necessarily great news, but also good news in another sense.
It sounds like they are stealing while deflecting.
It's a big deflection. It goes back to that ego part earlier, and we all have one. It's just do we take time to reflect that, you know, it's becoming destructive or it can be, a healing force. And as I say, my biggest hope is just to become or continue to be more collaborative through language. And if the S&C world are firmly in these positions and they're there for their reason and it's what's being deemed to be supportive, um, how can they open themselves up to go, what is still missing? And the reason why they have to ask themselves this question is because injuries do that. They're not decreasing, they are increasing. And if they were decreasing, then there could be a great argument to go, oh, do you know what? They've got more things under control than what maybe we give credit for. But that isn't currently happening. So you have to open up the opportunity for conversation to go, what else is there? I equally understand that there is a lot of quackery out there, and there are a lot of things which are there to be fillers, to take people's diverted attention away and spend money in nonsensical areas. So I get why there is going to be a level of rebuff, but if you're not open to the conversation, what learning is truly taking place? Not much, in my opinion.
Yeah, a few points there. I like back to the idea of my science is more important than your individual sensations or the actual feedback from the client, which usually is pretty important when you work with somebody. So like that's kind of, also as we saw during COVID, where like science became more of a religion, where because this piece of paper says something that makes it law, more or less.
Yeah,
Obviously, even though it's not a law, it's just a half-ass study from some random college on untrained volunteers.
yeah,
So
yeah,
there's lots of different pegs in that, or like there's so many holes in that thought process, but it's so common it's seen as normal. The other point was I had a colleague that he was gonna do one of those like seminars for Southampton, and then they showed up with all these cameras and wanting to record without permission, and I definitely see something like I definitely see some things like that occurring as well,
yeah.
where there is this some direct, like in your face, we have the degrees, but we want to take your stuff and deal with it type mentality. But I think the bigger question is, like, Stephen, where do you think currently the incentives for club physios and club S&C, where do their incentives actually lie? Because obviously a coach, they want their players healthy,
Yeah.
but a physio and S&C, I would have to say if a club had no injuries, there would be a lot less physios and staff. You know
Yes,
what I mean?
yeah. It's an interesting question. I would hope with the modernization of contracts and what we've seen more at top level, and I'm not sure like if this continues to filter down, but I'm sure it will. Is moderate wages, high bonuses, and I think this should be something that's looked at more as a club wide. So, i.e., once upon a time, I do believe that doctors used to get paid when people weren't sick. All right, that's when they used to get paid. So if the people aren't sick, that should be no different to maybe what the clubs are looking at is going. Actually, the less injuries we have, the more incentivized bonuses there will be for because we're all motivated. Money is what allows us to do a number of things in this world. No different for them, and it shouldn't be. If you can then use that as a driver, maybe then they will start to look at things from a different lens as well. Um, the S&C world, of course, they're rightly and wrongly, whatever way we want to look at this, driven by metrics of the player. If I make that player jump higher, if I make that player faster, then they've got these capacities to go and do the things on the pitch. The issue with that is actually with how they're feeling by way of nervous system, by way of tissue tension. Are they actually able to do those things when they go out to training? I've had players who wanted to spend longer out on the football pitch and were declined and told to go into the gym and do stuff. I think that's bonkers, personally. I do think that's bonkers. And I'm not saying like, yeah, go and spend hours upon hours whacking the ball into the goal, but like generally speaking, like that player there wanted to spend some longer outside and you got told no. Okay, so I would then think, oh well, maybe they're trying to manage that player's load holistically. Well, they're not because they're going to go and tell them to go and stress their nervous system out straight away within an S&C session. And for people listening, I have more details of what went on in that session to determine that it would have been highly fatiguing for them rather than it being more of a restorative type session. I just think that looking at it through that lens, the S&C coaches are designed to get better metrics, and that's how they're more than likely going to be rated upon. So therefore, the urgency to push is a lot higher, and that's where a lot of them may fall. I can tap back into the ego side of it. They want to feel like they've helped that player by pushing them a little bit more. The biggest thing we can do is learn to listen to the player, try and understand what their body is telling them, like i.e. the body language compared to even what the player is doing, because quite often the player is always going to want to do more as well. But you've got to take a 360-degree look at this. I actually made some notes. One of my players very kindly sent me a FIFPro document, which did a look at different trends. So it was the FIFPro player workload report, and I just made some notes. It's quite a detailed report. So I'll quickly read through what I've taken away from there. But it was the 2003-2024 like FIFPro men's workload monitoring annual report, and some of the key findings were they looked at excessive workloads in relation to congested match calendars as being a high health risk. So looking at that, albeit physiologically, mentally, emotionally, etc., like that, this here is a raise for concern for the individual. And they had said that they had looked at over 800 players, and 54% of those players had too high a workload. So that can be inclusive of stuff that we're talking about, S&C, gym. It can be also like the managers themselves wanting to do hours upon hours on the pitch. It can also be things that are like looking at flights and travel and the excessiveness of that. And as I say, if you're looking at flights, we can look at EMF and so forth. That would be more of our conversation, but just looking at through what they've looked at. They also looked at like long sequences of back-to-back matches. So 31% experienced 6 consecutive games, which is a lot when you're looking at it in tight turnaround times. They looked at like young players facing growing risks due to early overuse, and I think what I'm not sure about that is what they entirely mean. So is that overuse because of a 15-year-old is playing at under 21 levels and the dose dependency is too high for them? So their skill set might be greater than their peers, but the actual physiological response by going against people of that age may be detrimental? Or is it the fact that they're being pushed into other realms of exercise too early, too soon, more specifically like S&C lifts and stuff like that? I don't want to overly like bash it as an S&C term, because that will end up causing conflicting. And as I say, my root cause or my root kind of operation is to work in tandem. And then they looked at some players and their feedback. So they looked at Bernardo Silva, Jude Bellingham, Mbappe, all speaking about like types of burnout and stuff like that, and having to deal with the workload. I will put in tandem that although this has been looked at through this lens of isolation, you would also have to look at like how they choose to or how they're adding stress to their life by way of like extracurricular activities, their social media lives, their party or public state, they're doing a lot more things that are generally out there, which are stresses to the body. And that's where I would choose to look at things 360 degrees and hone in with a question: what is more important? Is it more important to have this external status, or is it that you want to be at the top of the game? And the players that I end up work with, we end up rerouting back towards the game as that key facilitator. So there is another conversation there that can be had. They looked at players like in a case study, Julian Alvarez. He had played 75 matches in a 14-month season, with 65% of those matches being back to back. A question can be asked of a manager here, because we've had a change in substitutions. You can now use 5 substitutions. Are they being used as proactively as what they could be? No, but are the pressures going to be the same on the manager if they're not getting the results? Yes, therefore the urgency is to get that same player back out on the pitch again. I believe a player should be able to recover in good time. Like I'm a big part of that, but also I'm aware that the effects of travel and what that does for players is also something that has to be considered, rather than it being looked at, right, you've played on a Monday, you should be able to play on a Wednesday. we don't know what's happening on a Tuesday. Do they have their own private trainers away that the clubs don't know about? I take that into consideration. So what else is actually truly happening within that player's workload as well? Um, their kind of recommendations off the back of this was to like implement like regulated match limits, so better recovery periods for players. Like I would be in agreement with this. Like if they looked at it through the lens of what does recovery truly mean, and can we successfully change that to show that players are recovering more, then I think that would be a way, when I'm looking at the game from the inside out, a better way of dealing with this. They then wanted to look at it more through the legal lens of treating footballers as an occupational safety issue. So, like, what are the concerns from a health and safety issue? And then, like, including players and unions in calendar planning decisions, which I think would be valuable as well. I think just from a nervous system perspective, if we feel like we have a say in something, we're more likely to be at ease with what we're trying to do to influence it for the greater good of others. And therefore, just that little bit of like looking at something, going, "Oh, this is really congested," to, "Oh, so and so player has actually voiced this on our behalf, and we've now got this in return." People just tend to simmer down from a nervous system perspective. So, as I say, it's a little bit of a snapshot. It was really interesting to get sent that and go through it. If memory serves me correct, the kind of initial bit was to listen to players more. That was their kind of introductory to this piece, which is no different to kind of how I opened up speaking today, is listening to the player more. And I think that is just key. And it doesn't have to be in this overall sense all the time. It's just that whatever department you're representing, regardless of what the actual thing is in front of me, i.e., my historical knowledge says I must do this. What is the person telling me, and what am I taking from their body? So that something simple, they may be going, "Oh yeah, I want to go out and do extra sprints," but the player may be yawning and having a tired kind of motion about them. Then I would want to ask myself, is this just momentary? Do I need to kind of instigate something that upregulates them a little bit, that they actually seem like they're about to go and do what they want to do with personal intent? Or are they completely tired and actually go, "Do you know what, head home and rest today"? In fact, I can second this actually with what happened with a player. One of my players who was at Hull, um, he, yeah, he went to Hull. The manager had got them at the end of the session, wanted them to do some sprints. They did 2 out of 3 sprints. At the end of the second sprint, the coach, or I don't know if it was directly the manager or one of his coaching team, had said, "Oh, okay, that's enough. Like, you don't need to do the next sprint." So I believe through conversation as well that what happened in that moment of hearing that you no longer need to do that intense thing, the nervous system does, it just turns down the dial a little bit. You go, a sigh of relief. He's then looked at his 2 players next to him, and they've gone, "No, we want to do the sprint." So they wanted to impress the manager by doing the original intent. He's then gone, "I need to do the sprint." He's gone and done the sprint, and he's pulled his hamstring. Now, when I had the conversation about his nervous system, it ranged true to him. He was still concerned that if he didn't do those things, would he be looked upon in a negative light? I said, what I personally would have done is I would have gone and got a football. I would have gone and two or 300 keepy uppies as a down regulative exercise to show that I'm still involved in the session by some way. Like, and I would look at you and be like, "Oh, he hasn't just walked off of the pitch. Like, he's actually gone and done something, and he's adding some value to it." But he there needed to unattach from the ego, unattach from the fear of not living up to the original request, and go, "Actually, my nervous system here is slightly relaxed a little bit." And again, what I'm saying may not be 100% true to why he got that hamstring, but if you're trying to learn how to listen to a body, you've got to take these things into consideration. And then you could have shown the manager or the coaching team that you're still in the session by just using the ball, 2 or 300 keepy uppies. You move on, you're fine the next day. So listening to the players are so key, but also players listening to themselves.
That's a big thing that I think in our modern world with social media and also all the training where you're not it's like bad to listen to yourself is many professional players have just lost touch with their own skin and their own tissue, so that when they eventually find their way to someone like you or myself, a lot of the work is just trying to get them back to that place where they're a kid again and they can just listen to their body and say, "Oh, I feel good," or "No, I don't feel good." and then do the right thing based off that sensation.
Yeah. Listen, it's such a key takeaway you just said there, and it's one of the biggest things I look for when I'm coaching. I feel good. Like I feel good. Like, and most people are scared to use that as a barometer because it isn't some metric or number. But at the end of the day, when you look at it holistically, a person has emotions, has feelings, has sensations, has an understanding of their own body. Like, why wouldn't you use that in tandem with other things at the very least? Like it's like it becomes this part where consistently I have to go, that doesn't matter, I must push through. And that's just a very military mindset, and it isn't conducive when looking at longevity. You've got to be able to know when to upregulate and downregulate, and you've got to have someone you can have honest conversations with about that. I go back early doors. Like one of my biggest things that I give to players is, especially off season, can I get them walking 20,000 steps a day on top of what they're doing? It doesn't mean that I go to them straight away. You walk 20,000 steps. I ask them to kind of work out what they're roughly doing. Oh, I do 8,000. I do 10,000, and then look to upskill it. You know, for you and I, we're aware that we're looking at mitochondrial density, that zone kind of two cardiovascular esque motion. But also, I'm looking at it through the lens of a parasympathetic activity that's quite low grade that can then supplement what they're trying to achieve when they're more high end. This level of walking consistently as it continues into the season has only continued to report benefits for the players. Like my players, more often than not, are not picking up small niggling injuries, are generally feeling good, loose, limber, happy to participate when they go to training, ready to go. Like all these are feedback words they give me that then say this practice here is highly valuable. And then the players that have kind of fallen off, and when we revisit certain conversations, I'll re speak to them about their walking. 100%, their walking has decreased. All right. So, as much as this is just me taking the feedback off the player, there isn't a big study to back it up. These are vital inputs that I need from a player and understandings to know what to do next. And if those basic things are falling off, it just means that their foundational level lowers a little bit. They don't have this output, this capacity, this template to move from that they once had. We improve the smaller factors of their lives. As a byproduct, they then get to apply themselves into the big thing, which is on the pitch and in training. Like nothing in this industry should supersede that. Like that has to be the number one thing. The sport is the number one thing. Playing the game is the number one thing. Getting your best result by way of personal development should come from the game. Like the rest of it is supplementary, secondary, supportive. So all these measures that I'm doing and giving them are complete supportive. They don't disrupt the output of the high end, but they work on this beautiful foundation, this template of what movement is. The rest just seems to happen.
Yeah, that's one of the concepts that I shared last month in a workshop is training the extremes is so much better because the middle will fix itself from playing football, which is
Yeah,
the most important thing, obviously. And if you don't train the extremes, you'll never get to the extremes because playing football
yeah,
will take up so much of your time and energy that well in football itself it's impossible to train the extremes correctly because of the combination of intensities that you
yeah,
can't uh, purely reach the low intensity and reach the high intensity. You're always kind of stuck, in that middle phase.
yeah.
And kind of taking our conversation towards the end of the road, and ultimately, I believe to a new model for professional football clubs. Now, I think at the highest level in the Premier League, I don't think this will happen anytime soon, but I do believe professional clubs at a lower level that don't have the budget to have multiple full-time staff in the medical department, in the SNC staff. Do you think there's a different model that they could basically use to contract with an outside agency of sorts, but a performance agency where a low tier or medium tier professional club can have world class support for their players, but not have to not but not but not but not have to pay the money for multiple full-time staff on site?
I think there's a couple of things that come to mind, and you can actually get world class support because world class support will come from the people that you're choosing to do. So you can take an understanding: do these people actually care about what they're doing? What is their main primary driver? So for me, and everyone who's known me knows this is a primary fact. I want to work with people that want to work with me. As a byproduct, we build a better relationship, we get better end results. So it's not about just throwing this out there for the mass. It is about looking at someone going, do they care? And if they do care, as a byproduct of that, I'm going to get world class support. This person's going to give me the right level of attention, information, reflection, all required to be able to move in that direction. I think the second thing, and this is really valuable by way of transition in the industry, you're seeing more young entrepreneurs or younger people looking to purchase or invest in clubs. And those are the ones that are more malleable and open towards information that's out there because that's part of their generation. They have this ability to look at and, albeit absorb in some way, all this different information because of the online spectrum. So I think it will be more accessible to have those conversations and accepted to build into those lower tiers. The beautiful thing about being in that setting is, when the information shared allows that team to excel or it's part of the journey of that player being sold onto a stronger academy, then the voice travels with that. So I think it creates a beautiful journey alongside the right entry point. And also from a club perspective, like yeah, they don't have the same level of finance to go and get all this top S&C, top research, individuals that are in working with them full time to be able to support their players. But looking at it through a lens of what different types of people are out there that support generally good movement habits, and then do they specifically tailor that towards football? No pun intended with your name there, but there we go. What we will then have a look at it is are they able to then bring this in amongst us? And the answer is yes. Like this is something completely applicable, and it's such low risk at the end of the day. Like if people are there and they're looking to improve upon movement of the players in a low grade fashion, so in a way that's going to be supportive towards output on a football pitch, then I think it's completely acceptable to be able to go down that route and build that relationship. So I think definitely, I think a lot of these players, they have a voice, and they can then start to share this information back to the clubs as they've got it, and it becomes a little bit more easier by way of having these conversations. Whereas, of course, as I shared earlier about something like non-disclosures and stuff like that, that information that I share won't travel anywhere but from that person and maybe one or two close friends that might go through something similar as them. But really, I'm under no illusion that my relationship with them will go beyond that, because just what it's contracted to be at the end of the day by them and the club, and by me and them. So yeah, so I'm quite hopeful of that. The other thing is like looking this through the lens of like not just in England, which is what I traditionally will do, being based here in London. Like I have worked with people in every single continent. This season just gone, I've just had one of my players go professional in India, which is a really great experience, and I will touch upon that kind of feedback in another podcast. But I think there's inroads at different ways, and I think there are different continents that are more or less open, or different countries and systems that are more or less open to different information. They're a little bit more malleable or receptive, whereas we're in the westernized world, which is completely driven by that hard science, and the rest of it actually are a little bit different. They are a little bit softer in their approaches and they're looking at things. So again, me as a person continues to be open to absorb that. And actually, just like when I had a meeting with the coach in India online, and I was asking about what they do for training and stuff, and they're so far behind everything. Like I mean, super. They just put out traditional weight circuits, and that's what they do for the player to excel by way of movement or S&C and stuff like that. And I was really shocked because I was like, oh wow. But again, there's more wiggle room within that, I feel, because they're going to need to upskill and upregulate and transition what they're doing as their systems, as their leagues continue to grow. And they are growing because they're taking players from England, from other areas that they weren't originally. So again, I think for us and me, like keeping that language completely open, and also accept I'm prepared to learn about the particular leagues and the slight differences and the nuances with what's going on behind the scenes. There's great and equal opportunity in doing it that way too.
Yeah, it's. I think I feel like obviously it's always easier to get in at a lower level sometimes, and then also there's players of different cultures that might have a inclination to be more open minded, like you're saying, to more natural methods, let's say. But in like as a final, I guess, as a final point for this first episode, I think it always comes back to the player himself and the individual,
Yeah,
because like ultimately you're the guy that's playing football and it's your career, and like when you get injured, you're the one that is in the hospital bed. And the physio goes back to his wife and kids, and he's fine.
yeah,
He doesn't. I mean, of course, like they care, but in reality, you're the one at the end of the day that is paying the price for mistakes.
yeah,
And it's funny because you'll have a lot of professional players that will pay thousands of dollars per day for clothes or shoes or stuff, but they won't invest in their food, or they won't invest in obviously coaching
yeah,
to keep them on point. Because like you were saying earlier, where it's almost like you or me, we become more of their therapist sometimes, and the agent doesn't even really care, and he'll just reach out every 2 months saying, how's it going, you
yep,
know and there's a really like robotical, transactional feeling to that relationship, where with Football Entangled, it's a 24/7 holistic experience. And if you talk to any players that I work with, um, you'll hear, basically conversation almost every day, talking about different subjects just based on their own growth and development. You think?
yeah. I agree with you. Just as you were saying that about like the agents calling, one of my players said the agent would only ever call when there was either like a contract renewal or a sniff from another club. They were looking at him, and it's just a shame to hear that. Like as I say, like if I'm where I am now, like I want as much involvement as the player is prepared to like let me into by way of conversation. It's not let me in. I want to control things. I don't want that to come across anyway. It is just through conversation to go, oh, this person actually truly cares. And when they reflect, they try to reflect on the entirety of what's going on, why they specifically know what we're trying to achieve. But it just means that they can plan a little bit more accordingly. Players go through different stresses. They have different things going on. That has to be in consideration of what's going on, not excluded from it.
Yeah, I think that's a very solid point to finish on. That every single player watching this, if you're amateur or you're playing the Champions League, like the story is the same. It's like you want connection, you want community, like you want support to help you achieve your goals and ambitions. And totally unbiased, but if if you're looking to do that, myself and Steven, we've been here for uh, a decent amount of time working with many different players. We have the methods. There's plenty of science to back it up, but it's just not the science that your trainer wants to look at. And all the everything is there for you. So this new series of episodes is to place a flag in the ground and truly announce to every single footballer across the world at every single level, and every agent, every scout, every coach, every owner, that like the what is currently going on is, in my opinion, abysmal. And if you want to change, you can come and work with Football Entangled. And you can down below in the comments leave questions about different areas that you want us to cover in the future, different topics, different rabbit holes that you think could be valuable to everybody in the football world. And we'll use that as a first step on different paths to investigate and to truly like uncover the truth and decode what it really means to be a footballer, and ultimately give you guys the the tools to conquer yourself and ultimately conquer your dreams. So if you want to work with me and Steven at Football Entangled, you can join Total Footballer, which is for non-professional players. But if you're a professional player, we only work a one-on-one, in person, or online. And so if you are professional, please reach out via email at taylor@footballentangle.com, and we'll be in touch. How's that sound, Steven?
Beautiful, 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 beautiful.
Anything, any last point that you want to bless them with, Stephen?
I will use a term that I'm going to touch upon, and I'd shared it with him here. But like the quality of your life is relative towards the quality of question that you're prepared to ask. And if you don't like the answers, you need to learn to ask better questions. I will divulge, and we will share and talk more about that. But just allow yourselves to reflect on that. If you're not where you believe you should or could be, what better questions can you ask yourself to determine better answers to get you there?
Spot on. All right, guys. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, follow, all that stuff. We'll see you next week. Cheers.